jumps out at anyone. It was the first meeting, so nothing earth-shattering took place, other than to invite the Integrity Commission to attend on the committee. So I move for the confirmation of the minutes. Huh? What? Oh yeah. Has anybody seen anything that needs to be corrected?
Remarks on the nature of the first meeting. I just received the committee. I need about another 10 minutes just to go through, another 5 minutes.
I'm not sure.
I need another 5 minutes just to go through.
Oh, you need to read what came from the
minutes.
Solicitor General?
No.
Oh, to read the minutes?
Yes. So may I have another 5 minutes, because I don't share the view necessarily that what we discussed was.
And that is why we always try to encourage members to come on time, so that they can read it before the meeting starts.
No, the meeting, these were issued. These were issued. I know you
will do that next time.
These were issued this morning.
But on this occasion, we'll bear with you.
Perhaps, Mr. Chairman, you could just allow, if necessary, for a recommittal of the item, if after the member reads it, if he finds any corrections. Yes. You could allow for a recommittal, and that way we wouldn't have to pause the progress of the meeting.
Not at all. Reverend Tweet? It would be. Take out not. Okay. And as we wait on the member from Western St. Andrew to diligently go through each line, as soon as he's through, we will proceed to take the minutes. Yeah, we recommit the item. But I said I must wait for him for 5 minutes.
I made a suggestion that we move on nonetheless. And
you want us to move on and come back and recommit?
And if necessary,
although he hasn't read it?
Right, so if necessary, we can have a recommittal if there are any corrections.
All right, okay.
But I think we could move straight to matters arising.
Fine, if that is the will of the meeting, we will so comply. The Integrity Commission annual report for 2018-2019. Now, at the first meeting, we spoke about whether or not we would do both today or attempt to do both today. Should we be able to do?
Mr. Chairman, I think you have jumped straight to item 7. So we were at item 5. Either we can confirm, or if not,
but I thought you said we would return.
Right, but there is a matter arising on item 6, which was the letter from the Attorney General's chambers.
Which the member referred to. You'd like to take that first, before we go on?
Yes, since it's in the order of the
all right.
And in fact, it's not controversial, Mr. Chairman, because it essentially confirms what Member Golding had suggested last week.
I think it confirms what the meeting confirmed.
Or the meeting had agreed. That on the face of it, it appeared to make reference to the... and then in terms of remedial action...
It's really information.
Point of order.
No.
Point of order here. Point of order. If we are going to recommit amendment corrections,
If necessary.
If necessary, we can move to matters arising. You need to have you can't confirm the minutes until you deal with the correction amendments.
Well, that's what I thought. That's why I was going on.
So if there are corrections coming from the member, it's after that they can go to matters to
that's why I was going
confirmation.
On.
Therefore, we can't discuss any issue
on the minutes
relating to the minutes until it's confirmed. And you can't confirm until the corrections are done.
So, Member Golden, Member Bunting, I would encourage you to just invite your colleague to go a little quicker. But this won't happen again because it'll be early enough to read it.
Well, the minutes were circulated by email, I believe. Am I correct, Clark?
So he should be well on his...
The minutes were circulated by email, so you don't have to wait to see them on the...
Member, are you in a position to? Are we in a position to proceed? No.
Yes, I think it's yes. So I move for the confirmation of the minutes subject to the correction made by a member to it.
Okay, all those in favor? Yes. So, and seconded? Okay. Now, matters arising.
Yes, to return to the letter from the Attorney General. Mm-hmm. It confirms what we had discussed, or what was suggested first by Member Golding, that there was an incorrect reference to Section 34 in Standing Order 73D.
Yes.
And the correct reference should be to Section 36 of the Act. And the Attorney General helpfully, although we didn't ask her explicitly,
went on.
She helpfully went on to show how we could rectify the error. And so I suggest that this committee could ask the clerk to draft the necessary, or to have drafted the necessary amendment to the standing orders to rectify
87?
That error, yes, to use Standing Order 87 to amend Standing Order 73DE, and then that be the appropriate motion could be brought to the House perhaps by yourself as chairman of the committee.
Sure.
and as House leader.
Well, Mrs. Cook, you heard the member and we are in agreement. So if that could be drafted and it could be taken possibly this afternoon, then we proceed. That is for, we're going to 73DE?
Yes, to amend 73DE along the lines of the AG's letter.
Okay, good. So now we go to item 7, new business. The Integrity Commission annual report. So we will, consistent with the decision of the last meeting, we will take the first report first. Okay, good. I'm going to invite members to comment on it, but there's just a couple of things I would like to. First of all, based on my cursory glance at it earlier and latterly to look more specifically, it occurs to me, quite frankly, that the Commission is financially challenged from the report that you are having challenges with being able to properly finance and to have the appropriate staffing to conduct investigations that are necessary. I just wanted to, at first, right off, to determine whether that is so. And if it is so, to what extent? No, we're doing 1 year
We're
first.
dealing with the first report.
First year first.
And just, Mr. Chairman, for good order and to help us, could you refer us to the section that led you to this conclusion? And while you're searching for that, let me welcome Mr. Christie and his team from the Integrity Commission.
Where's it here? You know, the section. There's a section here dealing with financing, funding, financing. I'm trying to find a specific reference to the challenges.
Chairman, why I ask you if you're dealing with both reports in light of your question is that the first annual report, the Integrity Commission was basically trying to set up office, and I just wondered if things have improved in the second report or the same challenge in terms of finances, would be there in the second report.
Look at it from if you see it. I remember distinctly. But Mr. Christie, I just, until I find a specific reference, are you aware of any such challenge?
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. If I may,
yes,
through you, sir, introduce the members of the team who are here.
Yes, of course.
Would you like to just hand this over to the chairman for me? To my left is Mr. Craig Beresford, and he's the Commission's Director of Information and Complaints. It's Mr. Kevin Stevenson. He's the Director of Investigation. Ms. Keisha Prince. Keisha is our Director of Corruption Prosecution. Mr. Maurice Barrett. Maurice is currently Senior Director, Non-Construction Contracts Investigation from the Legacy OCG. We're still in the process of transitioning positions across from the 3 legacy institutions into the Integrity Commission. So there are a number of our staff who are still holding titles that are associated with the legacy institutions. Ms. Sashane Wright. Sashane? Sashane is our Chief Investigation Division from the Legacy OCG. There's a document that we have circulated. Ms. Gillian Pottinger is our Legal Officer. Gillian. Ms. Carleen Knight is our Director of Corporate Services, and that's a legacy position as well from the OCG. Nicola Brown, our Human Resources Manager. Delana Gaskin, our Director, Information Systems and Technology. Ms. Joy Powell, most of you probably know Joy. She is currently our Manager of Complaints and Protected Disclosures, but Joy was initially the Secretary Manager for the Integrity Commission, Parliament Commission. And when the Integrity Commission was formed, yes, Joy is a very important member of the team. And finally, last but not least, my executive assistant, Shelley-Ann Lutas. Mr. Chairman and members, I just want to briefly say thank you very much for having us here. We feel privileged to be here to answer your questions. We recognize the Oversight Committee as being a key element in the anti-corruption institutional framework in Jamaica, as it has 5 very important duties, only the 4th schedule to the Integrity Commission Act. If I may just say a few words by introduction, Mr. Chairman, with your permission.
Oh, by all means.
Thank you, sir. The Integrity Commission is a new commission. Actually, tomorrow it's 2 years and 5 months old. It merges 3 legacy anti-corruption institutions, which you're all familiar with: the Office of the Contractor General, the Corruption Prevention Commission, and the Parliament Integrity Commission. Despite its age, it has had significant setbacks, and it's important that we set that context as a prelude to our discussions. First, as is evidenced by this very meeting, it's the second meeting of the Oversight Committee, first one having been held 2 weeks ago. The executive team of the Commission, which is composed of the Executive Director and 3 divisional directors, these persons were appointed in the main in the last 4 months. Our corruption prosecution, our Director of Corruption Prosecution, Keisha Prince, was sworn in just under 4 months ago, March 24. Myself and Kevin Stevenson, our Director of Investigations, we have been online for just 2 months. And Craig, our Director of Information and Complaints, he was just sworn in last week, Tuesday. So although we have a commission which is 2 years and 5 months old, the executive team is just getting in place. Added to that is that 3 of the 5 commissioners have been holding office for less than 11 months. The current chairman, the Honorable Mr. Justice Seymour Panton, was appointed chairman on August 1, 2019. Another commissioner, September 1, Commissioner Lloyd Hibbert, 2019. And another commissioner, Mr. Wayne Powell, was sworn in on March 24 of this year. And that has created a number of challenges for us. We're now just getting our arms around things, and we'll speak more on some of the issues that we're facing. One is that we have come to find our organizational structure for the Commission, which has already been approved by the Section 35(1) Committee of Parliament, which is established for that purpose. But we have found that that structure is not fit for purpose. So I've met with stakeholders, including the Speaker of the House, the President of the Senate, the Prime Minister, the Minister of Finance, to advise them of that problem and that we are constrained to review the structure, which we are now in the process of doing. I should say that Justice Panton and the commissioners have asked me to extend their best wishes and warm greetings to you. Of course, we're here speaking on their behalf. This commission, the powers and functions of the commission are vested in the 5 commissioners. And any questions that you may have today that we are unable to answer, I will advise you, and I will, consult with the commissioners and get your response as soon as possible. We recognize that in terms of the rule of law, we're guided by the long title of the Act, the 4 objects of the Act, which are set out in Section 3, the 16 functions of the Act, which are set out in Section 6, and of course the duties of the Oversight Committee, which are set out in the 4th schedule to the Act. We're hopeful that at the end of the day, and in terms of any future deliberations that we have and engagements that we have with the Oversight Committee, will rebound to the benefit of the country, and will certainly strengthen the Commission to ensure that it's sufficiently effectively and it can effectively and efficiently discharge its mandates under the law in keeping with the objects and functions of the Commission. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I could go straight to the question that you asked, and I'll answer it in a very guarded way. I have not necessarily seen any challenges that we're facing in terms of being underfunded. We're currently going through an examination of our functions. There are a number of areas in which we will be coming back to the Section 35(1) committee of this Parliament to look at a revised organizational structure, and that will involve adding a few more persons to the 135 staff complement that has already been approved. That, of course, will have financial implications. There are other things, Mr. Chairman. For example, as I think most of us are aware, we have probably 30 to 40,000 public servants who are required to file declarations of assets.
Mr. Chairman, are we here to review the report or what? I think we should concentrate.
No, but let the member, I asked him.
No, no. What I'm saying here, we concentrate on the report.
No,
but what I'm hearing, it's for another forum, another time.
No, well,
because the thing with the review committee has nothing to do with the oversight committee. So some of what I'm hearing is not for this meeting, or for what we're here to review the two reports. So we could concentrate on what we're here for.
Member, the purpose for having the commission here is to gather information and to get some degree of clarity as to what is involved, the structure there, because it's a new commission.
This is not what the agenda says. And what came out was sent to the members. It specifically states what we're coming here for today. So what you are saying now is not a part of what you are the committee sent out to us, the committee section sent to us. So let us concentrate on what we're here to do. What we're hearing can be dealt with in another forum. That's supposed to be dealt with. For the last sentence, the last argument, that's for the review committee, not for the oversight committee.
No, Mr. Chairman, with respect, I disagree with the member from Southwest St. Catherine. I think the executive director was quite appropriately putting his response to your question in context. And it is important for us to understand the context of what he's saying. I'm finding what he's sharing very helpful in terms of establishing a framework for us to review both reports. And I think while the members will fashion their questions, unless it is a very specific closed-ended type of question that just requires a yes-no answer, we shouldn't seek to direct Mr. Christian how to answer. That is he has a certain amount of discretion there, and I think what the context that he has been giving is important for us to understand the specific response which he will give in terms of the financial adequacy of the budget that they've been provided.
Member Golding.
Thank you, Chair. I endorse that. I would just say this is an oversight committee. It has a broad compass to review the functioning of the Integrity Commission. This is the first occasion that we are hearing from the Commission through Mr. Christie and his team. It is wholly appropriate, in my view, for him to give an overview in the nature of in his opening remarks as to his impression, having come on the job relatively recently, what he's discovered, what the issues are as he sees it. Yes, the main items on the agenda are the 2 annual reports. A lot of what he's saying are relevant to what's in those reports. I think we should let him continue and finish his remarks so we can proceed from there.
Mrs. Mallow.
Chairman, sorry.
Mrs. Mallow-Ford.
Thank you, Chairman. Just want to say that if you had invited the Executive Director to make comments, it's quite appropriate to allow him to make those comments.
Yes, well,
yes, Chairman. May I just say, I agree, and I just ask my good friend to be a bit tolerant. I just want to bear in mind, though, this oversight committee must be seen differently from what we hope will be a review committee that will be looking at the act itself. And if you don't mind me breaking secrecy between you and me, before this commission was set up, you yourself had pointed out to me that many improvements to what we actually enacted you had contemplated, right? We're hoping that some of these improvements that you had discussed with me, that when the review committee begins, that you can put. So if you don't mind, tailor it to some existing problems rather than to the act itself, which a review committee will shortly be set up, maybe have the same members, but to look at a review of the act itself consistent with what is contemplated, okay?
Mm-hmm. Madam A.G.
Chairman, just wondering though, to the extent that an assessment of the effectiveness of the work of the Commission is impacted by the provisions of the Act, it's going to be a little difficult to separate out, even though that work is going to be done differently, because what we're looking at is the objectives that we are seeking to achieve, and whether the Commission has been sufficiently enabled through the legislative provisions to achieve those objectives. So there has to be a level of flexibility as we discuss the issues, to my mind.
Okay. Well, the reason why I asked you is because I can think of no way to appreciate the scope and content of your job without finding out if the appropriate assets needed to conduct your job in a suitable manner are available. And I speak against a specific reference on page 5 where it says, no, sorry, my apologies. Page 6, where it says, we are dealing with the first report. Oh, weren't you here earlier, member? We did say that we are dealing with the first report. So I wish you to be very precise when you ask your questions. It will help us to move forward quickly. So, specifically, the reference compensation for the commissioners also requires the approval of the Oversight Committee. We are surprised that to date there has been no determination as regards our compensation. Now, that is a very categorical statement.
Chairman, that's a dated statement, I believe, because to your and my certain knowledge, this matter has been dealt with by the Cabinet.
No, I'm asking him because we are doing, that's one of the reasons I said we should just go with the second and make reference to the first. So since we have decided to go with the first, we can't spend the day asking questions on the first and making the second be the reference of the first.
May I make a suggestion for your consideration,
So
Chairman?
if you can answer by just simply referring to the second, I'd appreciate it.
Yes,
and
yes,
we can move on.
Mr. Chairman, I can clarify that. It's dated, as Madam Attorney General said. There's an inaccuracy in this statement. The Oversight Committee does not have jurisdiction over this matter. Section 22 puts that matter to a resolution of both houses of Parliament. So that was an inaccurate statement in the report, one. And two, the commissioners are well and adequately compensated as at this point. There are no issues with respect to
There are no issues.
No,
Chairman,
absolutely not.
Could
Mr. Christie just point us to where in the report those two?
No. May I just add, Chairman? There's no doubt that there was a long lapse between when the commissioners were set up. Nothing was put in, but Cabinet considered it, and the matter was referred to the Ministry of Finance, so that at this present time, so in the first report is correct, because by then the compensation had not been decided on.
Accurate to the point, member, that it says that it's a responsibility of the Oversight Committee.
Right, okay.
If it were the Oversight Committee, they would not have been paid because the Oversight Committee is just meeting.
It does not exist.
Yeah. Right. Yes. We have the documents, which I'll hand out to you, which will give you particulars of the compensation that the members of the Commission are currently getting.
Chairman, I'm concerned at this statement, Mr. Christie, that a section of the report sent to Parliament is incorrect. I'm deeply concerned. Who reviewed the report before it came to Parliament? No, who reviewed the report from the Parliament?
Honourable member, may I answer? That statement, as you can see, is chairman's remarks. I can't speak for the then chairman, but that's the chairman's remarks.
Yeah, but I'm saying Parliament must treat with the respect necessary. We can't be sending inaccuracy to Parliament. We can't send inaccuracy to Parliament. You didn't say an error, you said inaccurate. You did not say an error, you said inaccurate.
To the extent
My
that
concern, you don't cross,
Mr.
Christie, you don't cross-talk a member. In a committee in Parliament, you don't cross-talk a member. You allow a member to complete his statement before you speak. That's the rule of Parliament. I am saying if this is incorrect, how many other statements are incorrect? I'm deeply concerned.
Chairman, may I answer through you? Sure. You will have to direct that question, honourable member, to the former chairman. It's his remark. You're the one who worked for 3 years. I have been with the commission for 2 months.
Mr. Chairman.
All right.
Mr. Chairman, you think we could go ahead with Mr. Christie, since that's a decision, and finish Christie, so we can ask questions?
I have another reference that I'd like
Why not let him finish his report, Mr. Chairman? We all have questions when he's finished.
Okay.
Thank you, Chairman and honourable members. You had asked about my view on the financial adequacy, the provisions for the Commission. We are currently engaged in a review, now that the executive team is on board, and we are going to be coming back to the Parliament with a revised organizational structure. We're also going to be coming back to this committee for revisions not necessarily revisions to the Act, but to seek clarification with respect to certain provisions of the Act, which we believe significantly broadens the mandate of the Commission to the extent that it will require us to monitor corruption in the private sector. So far, the focus of the Integrity Commission and its legacy institutions have been on corruption in the public sector. But we believe that the legislation, broadly interpreted, extends to corruption in the private sector. And to that extent, we would have to develop a revised organizational structure down the road, which gives the Integrity Commission the capacity, the operational capacity, to deal with that. So on 2 levels, we're going to be coming back with one organizational structure now, and then in the future another one. And I was speaking about the paper-based asset declarations that we all do now as public servants, public officers. We want to migrate from a paper-based system to an electronic system. You can stay at home, you fill out the information on your computer, and it goes directly to us. Eliminates the need to, and that is going to cost money. We have gotten pledges of support from our international development partners, in particular the United Kingdom High Commission through DFID. They have stepped up to the plate and they have indicated a willingness to assist on that particular project. But we foresee that we will be coming back to the Parliament for an enhanced budget.
Mr. Chris, go ahead, Member Twins.
Chairman, partly a point of procedure and then something substantial. If we're going to be approached with revised organizational structure, that has to relate to the terms of the legislation. The scope of the legislation has to be discussed prior to the appropriate organizational structure to execute it. And I'm anxious that we place things in that order, because what strikes me from reading these 2 reports, if you don't mind me just referring to both of them, is that from page 6 of the first report and then page 21 of the second, there are significant amendments to the Act that are being proposed by the Commission. From a public standpoint, and remember, we all remember who it is we serve. From a public standpoint, they want to know, the public needs to know, that the laws that we as legislators enact are suited for the purposes that they wish us to achieve, all of us. So I'm a little puzzled that Minister Chuck speaks about this review committee, which is yet to come. That's a reproach. If the Act needs changing, that should come first. Pardon? Well, we better get that going first, don't we? Because the review committee. Certainly, but what
Member, let me.
I would like to finish.
I might be able to throw some light on the specific the reason why I went there in the first place.
Went where, sir?
Requesting to find out the state of their capabilities financially to underwrite the work.
No, I understand that, you know. I'm
yeah,
not
but I don't want
that.
to leave that, and I don't want us to stray from that point right now. I'll come back to the point you're trying to make.
Okay,
you're trying to make a larger point. So I'll come back to that afterwards. The specific point is, Mr. Christie, and I'm glad you touched on it, because it was to do with exactly my point on page 16, where you say the report says this unit has the responsibility to collect statutory declarations and to enter the information from the individual declarants to the database. These functions are executed by all officers. But the very point you make is that you are in transition, so to speak, organizationally, structurally, which will require additional resources. And you go on to say, at current, and in the absence of a new organizational structure, these are the words of the report, in the absence of a new organizational structure, and then you go on to speak of, under this, the unit is understaffed, which has implications for resources. I just want an explanation of the language used. And let me just finish. Understaffed, as evidenced by the chronic backlog of posting of statutory declarations to the database. Now, you are charged with responsibility of examining declarations on which you are to report. You are seeking to introduce a new and more efficient structure. But at the same time, you're struggling with the inability to get these on the database so that you can analyze it quickly and report efficiently. It is the heart and soul of the Commission. We can't sit here and talk about an integrity commission that is not able to carry out its responsibilities in an efficient way, which the people of Jamaica are expecting it to do. So that's the reason why I started where I did. And that is the reason why I said continue, because I find your explanation of it, albeit as a newcomer, very instructive. It is a basis on which we can have a reference as to the strategies going forward. Yeah, well, yeah, he does too. Yes, so Mr. Christie, these are things that are troubling. I don't know if you concur.
I agree wholeheartedly with you, Mr. Chairman. And I'm going to ask Craig. Craig was appointed last week, but he can speak eloquently. Last week, Tuesday.
Talk about
but he can speak eloquently on the issues that you just articulated in terms of where we are now and where we're headed and the challenges that we're facing now. Craig.
Let me turn mine off.
Thank you very much, Edie, and good morning, everyone, Chair, members. As it concerns your specific question with respect to the capacity in particular of our Information and Complaints Division, we are undertaking several projects. In the first instance, we are looking at project ties in the data entry, which is entering all the backlog information from as far back as 2003. We're also looking at developing algorithms in the e-filing system, which will be able to churn out certain information with respect to asset movement and also matters concerning network statements. And then we will layer it with two processes, a risk-based management process where we will identify certain risky public officials and categories, and then also an audit process. And with that, we should be able to discharge our obligations under the Act. But to do so, we are going to require some more staff to do that deeper interrogation. So we are projectized in the data entry. It will take us to over 300,000, going back as far as 2003, to do some degree of assessment. And then using a risk-based approach, we'll pull out certain categories, focus on those, and then we'll have an audit process which will ensure that we're able to touch on most, if not all, of the other public officials at some point in time. And this will require additional staff to undertake this mammoth task. And the IT system also will become very important. So we are now taking stock to see exactly where we are. There are going to be some legal issues that we have to navigate through, in particular as it concerns electronic signatures. And we're working through that now. So in terms of rolling out such a system, we may have to do it in two phases. We may have to start out with, first, just ensuring that the form is electronic, but you still have to print it and get it stamped. We'll have a drop box. So you won't be required to wait as long. You just drop it off, we do the assessment, and we send it off. During the COVID time, exactly. And it worked out quite well. But going forward, when you have the electronic signatures, there won't be the need again for you to come in and drop. And then we will do the assessment. If we require further information, when we interrogate the declarations, that's when we'll invite persons to provide same. But we want to ensure that we have a more robust system because we're aware of many things that could influence these declarations, and we will ensure that we incorporate them in our respective processes. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you, Chairman. Just wanted to find out, on average, how many statutory declarations do you receive annually? Just to get an idea of the ratio of the assessment.
Well, before you answer that, because mine relates to the same issue. So you could, under Section 39 of the Act, the need to file the annual declarations doesn't apply to public officials whose total annual emoluments are less than $3.5 million. It was a much lower figure before the Act. I'm wondering, no, subsection 3 does say that regulations under the Act may require certain posts to file even if they are earning below that threshold. I'm not aware if there are any such regulations or not. Maybe. So one question is, are there any such regulations? If there are not, is the backlog largely in relation to persons who were obliged to file in the past when the threshold was lower? And third question is, currently, with the 3.5 million, how many public officials fall within the category of earning over $3.5 million per annum? Yeah.
Thanks for your question, member. Through you, Chair. As it stands now, we have over 33,000 public officials per annum that are required to file. And there you go. And not necessarily, because remember, over the years, okay, yeah, not the past, current.
Currently?
Yes.
It's very important to understand, because I do recognize that where it was pitched before, it was a much wider net. And,
Yes.
the numbers were enormous, and I don't think the then commissions could cope with the volume. But the threshold was deliberately reset at a higher level so as to restrict that, narrow the volume, and allow for particularly sensitive posts to have to file even if they were below the threshold amount. So I'm interested, and maybe you don't have that data with you, member, but if you don't, feel free to say you'll provide it later, but how many public officials do earn over $3.5 million and currently, and therefore have an obligation to file annual declarations?
As it stands now, we will do some investigation and provide a more comprehensive report. But what I can say is that all police officers and Army officers are required to file. So even if there are changes in the threshold, the numbers will vary just a bit. But as it stands now, we're looking at 33,000 in total.
You mean police officers or police personnel, like constables?
Everyone, police officers, everyone.
So every
all
member
categories.
of the JCF and
all
JDF.
categories at JCF and JDF.
What about persons who are involved in the granting of permits for developments or other matters along the stage? Has any consideration been given to those as sensitive positions?
Yeah, as it stands now, well, the regulations are being developed. However, I mentioned that we're going to be taking a risk-based approach. So as we do that, we'll assess and look at the positions within organizations that we believe can influence decision and that are susceptible in some way, shape, or form. So that assessment will have to be undertaken along the way, and then they will fall within our net. And then we'll make the necessary proposals for them to also be placed in the regulations as persons that must declare on an annual basis.
Chairman, the gentleman is dealing with declaration. The question I'd like to ask, are the commissioners and directors of Integrity Commission, do they file declarations?
Mr. Chairman, through you? Yes. I think that question came up, and Mr. Justice Panton, the chairman, gave a public response. But for the purposes of this hearing committee, a legal opinion has been sought from the Solicitor General on the question of whether or not the commissioners, 5 commissioners, are required to file. I think Mr. Justice Panton's position is that as far as he's concerned, he's filing, and he's quite open to making his declaration public. We're awaiting the response from the Solicitor General. That letter was written about 4 or 5 weeks ago, and we're waiting for that legal opinion. With respect to the rest of your question, Honourable Member, the directors and employees, everybody files.
This filing is done to whom?
The filing is done pursuant to the provisions of the Act. If you look at Section 64 of the Act, 64(1)(c), it speaks to the Commission may make regulations prescribing the procedure and the manner for the filing of statutory declarations by the Commission, the directors and the staff of the Commission. The way Parliament drafted this law, that responsibility has been left to the Commission. Personally, I heard your comments, Honourable Member. It creates a conflict of interest situation, and that's something that the Commission is looking at. I can share another option with you. I was recently, as you know, holding a similar position with the TCI Integrity Commission, and in that jurisdiction, the employees and the directors and commissioners of that commission, their asset declarations are filed with the governor of the TCI. But then remember also it's an overseas British territory. Whereas here, if you should file with the Governor General, the question is who in that office would actually do the review. It may come right back to public servants, which would create a problem. So as it stands right now, and I think Justice Panton alluded to the issue that we all have before us is that Parliament drafted this law, leaving this responsibility to the Commission. And what we can do, we've been looking at a number of alternatives within the Commission as to how we deal with it. One, for example, and this is a matter for the commissioners to decide on, I just want to say that. But one option is, for example, and let me just step back. Remember that the Corruption Prevention Commission for years have been doing just this. The members of the Corruption Prevention Commission have been taking their own declarations over the years. So there's nothing different then than you have now. But the question, I admit, is one that should be focused upon. But coming back to the options, one of the things that we could look at, Honourable Member, to minimize the conflict of interest challenge is to have the employees continue to submit their declarations, as it has been done in the past, to the Information and Complaints Division, which is headed by Craig, and in the past, for the interim period, Joy. When it comes now to his declaration, it should go elsewhere. He can't, obviously, review his own declaration. And one of the things, it could go to the commissioners in themselves. It could go to one of the commissioners, for example, the Attorney General, the Auditor General, I'm sorry. So that's one way of handling it. But again, the matter resides squarely within the House, the Houses of Parliament. That's how the law is structured. And we're in the process under Section 64 of devising regulations to address that very issue.
Yes.
May I just a few comments, and I don't necessarily want an answer now. But can you investigate how other integrity commissions around the world have operated, and whether or not this annual filing of statutory declarations is the best way to use the time and energy of the Integrity Commission? I have no doubt that parliamentarians and maybe senior government officials should file reports. But when we impose it on 33,000 people in the public sector, I ask myself, and I've only had one opportunity to visit the Corruption Prevention Office in 2011, and you had some rooms bigger than the Parliament filing statutory returns. I wonder if those returns were ever really examined, because I don't know how your staff, even if you had 100 staff, can examine these 30-odd thousand reports every year. It's just not possible. So the question arises, can we find another methodology to deal with the pursuance of corruption in the public and elsewhere? Yes, with the Integrity Commission before, 83 or 84 parliamentarians, no problem. But I'm just wondering about the public sector and its 30-odd thousand declaration. I'm not asking for an answer, but I would like you to find if there's not a better way that you can utilize your time.
Mr. Chairman, can I respond to the Honourable Member?
Yes, of course.
Thanks for your question, Honourable Member. You spoke about examining how it's done in other jurisdictions. Again, I can allude to the TCI, which has a much smaller population than Jamaica, both in terms of its public sector and its general population. And one of the things that I found intriguing about how they handle asset declarations is that they require it once every 2 years. You file once every 2 years. And I see no reason why our Parliament would not want to consider that as an option. I would not want to rule out the filing of asset declarations, because when you look at our international conventions, and we're parties to 2 anti-corruption international conventions, United Nations Anti-Corruption Convention and the Inter-American Anti-Corruption. Both of them speak to the offense of illicit enrichment. And our Corruption Prevention Act also speaks to the offense of illicit enrichment. And you cannot make that assessment in terms of a person's assets and their legitimate income without a declaration. So I would say that the fact of a declaration, it's a very important tool in the whole issue of fighting corruption, a declaration made by public sector. What I would suggest then is to retain the declaration, required the declaration, but to reduce the frequency by which you do it. I would say once every 2 years is something that you may want to look at. I don't think it would do any injury to the whole scenario.
Mr. Bunting.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm specifically referring to the chairman's remarks on the development of the operational structure of the commission. That section on page 5, the first report, first annual report. It seems to me, Mr. Chairman, that the corruption prevention activities of the 3 agencies that have now been merged into one have been seriously set back by prematurely bringing into operation the new Integrity Commission Act. And I say that because although the Act came into effect on February 22nd, 2018, which then basically moved the authority from the Office of the Contractor General, the Corruption Prevention Commission, and the Parliamentary Integrity Commission, the task of developing an organizational structure for the combined agency, the staffing, the operational procedures, the operational policies were still undetermined. And it makes no sense to have brought the Act into operation before you had made all the transitional provisions and the planning for the transition that would have been necessary. So, reading this, that it is clear to me that it's very difficult for this Oversight Committee to be critical of the slow pace, particularly in year 1 of the Commission's work, because the fault lay squarely at the feet of the Minister of Justice, who either through naivety or whatever other reason prematurely brought the Act into operation. Any person with the most rudimentary management skills would have understood that that was not the way to bring this into operation. That's my first comment. My second comment or question is the Office of the Contractor General was perhaps the most active of our corruption prevention agencies before being merged. It had a number of investigations which were public. They were declared because they had no such restriction as the integrity, this new Integrity Commission has. It's been now 2.5 years since the new commission was brought into operation, and we have heard nothing in terms of reports being tabled on these investigations that were started over 2.5 years ago. That is completely unacceptable to my mind.
No, but on a point of order, that is not the responsibility. That's the responsibility of the then head of the unit and the organization that exists to table it. But one of the beautiful things about this is that it has to be tabled, what is it, 3 months?
No. Perhaps you're misunderstanding me, Mr. Chairman. I am saying there were investigations that the Office of the Contractor General had embarked upon, had initiated and publicly announced. For example, into the firearm licensing authority.
Prior to the establishment of this?
Prior to bringing this Integrity Commission.
I see what provide for the continuance of those.
Those investigations should have been continued by the Integrity Commission, this new Integrity Commission. In fact, they have an obligation to have continued those investigations. But for the vast majority of those investigations, we have not seen any report.
You might want to ask them.
And I'm asking, 2.5 years later,
just ask him why without it.
Why have we not seen these reports coming out of the pipeline, given that these investigations were well underway even before the establishment of the Integrity Commission?
Mr. Christie, would you like to respond?
No, attack the Minister of Justice.
Oh, you wish to?
The Minister of Justice needs to respond. No. In your presentation, you attacked the Minister of Justice.
I didn't attack the Minister of Justice.
The Minister of Justice.
I made an observation.
No, but I need to respond.
Which is factual.
He was
which is
cannot be factual.
What he's trying to say is he was not attacking you personally, he was attacking the office.
No. He attacked the Minister of Justice. Chairman, just for the record.
In fact, it was not me. If you feel attacked, it is by the comments, the remarks of the chairman of the commission, because I am quoting from his chairman's remarks in the first annual report.
No, Chairman.
I'm not inventing this.
Chairman,
this is the chairman's remarks.
No, Chairman, no, please. Let us get this correct. This Integrity Commission was set up in its present form, postulated by the former administration. When we got in March of 2016, we made some changes and debated it before the end of the year, and the Act came into operation, or the Act was passed in 2017, the beginning of 2017. It having been passed, there was great checks to see how we could bring all three commissions together. And finally, in 2018, late 2017, 2018, the commissioners were appointed. The Prime Minister and myself had one meeting with them and said, it is all over to you. Because since then, I have not had one meeting with the commissioners. So everything from then had to deal with the commissioners setting up the office, doing whatever they need to do. So to blame the Minister of Justice for anything that happens then is not fair, because having passed the Act and put the three commissioners together, it was all over to the commissioners.
You are under no obligation to bring it into operation prematurely before proper planning and transitional arrangements have been made.
Call the demand around the country, including from Member Bunting and Member Golden. When is this Integrity Commission going to come into operation?
Chairman, look here.
Colleagues,
Chairman, what I'm going to say here, we should be arguing among ourselves on this issue. We're here to deal with the
we don't want to get into
let us deal with and stop our
situation
when we get to the house, we can
that
deal with
cannot
this.
be determined.
Not here.
I'm agreeing with the member
what
from
I would
Southwest
ask
St.
is,
Catherine on this point.
Please, are you commenting on this point, member?
Yes, Chairman.
Okay, fine, and then Reverend Thwaites.
No, Chairman, I'm agreeing with the member from Southwest, Member Warmington, on this matter. That really we have the benefit of the commission, the executive director, and the commission here, and I think for us to use the time in this way. The question is an appropriate question. I think it was aimed generally, but I think we really do not need to get into a squabble about it. Let us just keep a focus and continue to work. I think it's very important that we use the time wisely.
Reverend Thwaites?
Chairman, since the Minister of Justice is just, and since the purpose of the Integrity Commission is a just one, the only material thing outcome of Member Bunting's question is to hear when those investigations are going to be complete and what will be the result
That's
thereof.
what I was trying to get to with Mr. Christie, but you got into this downhill slide. You can't, look here, Minister of Justice, you cannot follow Mr. Bunting down every lane he takes,
Some things are not supposed to be allowed to go on the record without a response, respectfully, Chairman.
You can't follow him down there because he has, that's a peculiarity with his personality. So just deal with the most important aspect of it. Don't follow him down that lane. Mr. Christie.
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Honourable Member Bunting raised two issues. One concerning the establishment of the organizational structure for the Commission, and also issue with legacy investigation reports. I'll offer my views and responses on both. In my opening remarks, I attempted to set the context, and I think Member Bunting's question falls right in that context. The Commission, although it's 2 years and 5 months old, has suffered significant adverse circumstances. I pointed out that the executive team, 3 of its 4 members are 2 months old. 1 is 1 week old, and the 4th was sworn into office only in March. It means that prior to that, the Commission was operating with an interim team. We've read a number of reports in the newspapers. There were significant issues. And I think the work output of the organization suffered as a result. There were also transition issues, which I found when I came. There was low worker morale, and for a number of reasons, which I may not want to, unless you want details. But the fact is that, and if you also look at the level of the Commission, there are 5 commissioners. 1 is there by virtue of office, and that's the Auditor General. The other 4 commissioners, of those 4, 3 of those 4 were appointed in office as recently as August last year. The chairman, Justice Seymour Panton, he was there before, but he was only appointed chairman in August last year. So he was given stewardship of the Commission only recently. And Mr. Justice Lloyd Hibbert was appointed a month after in September. And we had a 3rd commissioner who was appointed in March this year. So at the leadership level, both at the level of the Commission and at the executive, you had significant issues. And that trickled down into a lot of the things that we have now seen. And I'll give you just one. And when I met with the Prime Minister, this is what I said to him when I met with the Speaker of the House. I said the same thing, the President of the Senate, and the Ministry of Finance. Now, if you're creating an institution, and by that I mean an organizational structure, to administer the mandates that are set by Parliament for the Interior Commission, where I would start would be the legislation, Section 6. Section 6 itemizes 16 functions that this Commission is supposed to have. Section 3 speaks to 4 objects, but the actual functions are contained in Section 6. When we look at the organizational structure, which was assisted by a change management consultant, it came before the Section 35(1) committee. It went to the Ministry of Finance after they had significant issues with it. What I found, and I've been around the track a number of times, in change management issues, both in the private and public sector, what I found was that it was not fit for purpose. Of the 16 functions that are outlined in Section 6, the mandates of this Commission, basically only 4 or 5 were addressed by the structure. Let me repeat that. Just about 4 or 5 were addressed by the 3 operational divisions. There are 2 ways to fight corruption. You can be preemptive, preventative, or you can proactive, or you can wait until the horse goes through the gate and then you investigate. And I say that to say that when you look at the 3 operation divisions for the Commission, you have complaints and information, which is where the process starts. If you have an allegation of corruption, it starts here. If you have an asset declaration, it starts here. Then you go to investigation, to investigate. And then if a case is made, you go to prosecution. And we have those 3 functions here. The 2 that are missing, we can't arrest anybody, but Parliament decided that they would not give us that power. There are other anti-corruption commissions that have that power, so we have to rely upon law enforcement. And of course, the courts, which is always standalone to adjudicate issues. But there was nothing in that design which spoke to preventing corruption. Preventing corruption. Although the overwhelming majority of the mandates that you'll find in number 6, section 6 of the Act speaks to preventing corruption. And it's something that I've found in my experience elsewhere as well. The legislation speaks to it, but the institutional framework just forgets it. So when we looked at it, I went, and this was in my first week in office. Well, really not my first week in office. Before I took the job, I recognized that there was a significant flaw. And I raised it with the Commission, and I said, well, what do we do? It's either you go forward with this flawed organizational structure, or you stop and fix it. And I got their approval to stop and fix it. Yes.
The structure you're speaking about is a structure that was done internally within the Commission, or the structure that is set out in the legislation?
Not the structure which is set out in the legislation, right, because the legislation provides for 3, right, but it gives the Commission the authority to establish other divisions.
Right.
Right. So, but what was established, Madam AG, is just a structure with 3 operational divisions, and none of them address preventing corruption.
And the impact of that would, I mean, what would be required would be permission from the Ministry of Finance for additional staff and additional posts.
Absolutely. But I should hasten to say that what was approved by the Section 35(1) Parliamentary Committee was 135 members of staff. We have done a revision, and I won't go into that now, but we are looking to come back to Parliament with somewhere around 145. So it's not a whole lot. And we would have a 4th operation division, and that division will focus upon preventing corruption. And when I say
primarily, Mr. Christie, you're focused here around education, is it?
Absolutely, Honourable Member. That's one way that you do it, through educating your stakeholders. And another significant way, which is provided for in the Act, is contemplated by Parliament, is to interrogate public body processes and procedures, to identify processes and procedures which will create fertile ground for corruption or irregularity or impropriety. And then in our case, we have to make recommendations to the powers that be to fix them. Now, I just want to not belabor the point, but and perhaps I've had this discussion with the Minister of Justice, and it has been in my writings in terms of, how can you make the Commission more effective? But based upon other jurisdictional frameworks and best practices in anti-bribery and anti-corruption, what you find is that the Anti-Corruption Commission is given the authority not just to make recommendations, but to instruct the recommendations. The Sierra Leone, could you pull that one for me, please? The 2008 Sierra Leone Anti-Corruption Act is a classic case model for that. You could distribute this for me, please. Section 7H and 8 of this. Their Anti-Corruption Commission gives them the same has the same mandate that we have, which is to interrogate public body processes and procedures, to identify errors that could breed corruption. In our case, we must make remedial recommendations, and we would make those recommendations, for example, to this Oversight Committee, because this is how we engage. In that model, the Anti-Corruption Commission instructs the change. and the public body has 3 months within which to effect the change. They can respond with their own opinion, but at the end of the day, the Anti-Corruption Commission has a final say. And if the change is not carried through, the head of that public body or the accounting officer, and you see that in Section 8, is guilty of a criminal offense and subject to a fine, not imprisonment. And he's also subject to losing his or her job. In the TCI, where I'm coming from, they had a similar, not the same, proviso, where you can interrogate public body processes and procedures, but their law uses 3 words: instruct, direct, or advise, but there's no sanction if the public body doesn't follow through. So Sierra Leone, there's a sanction, you have to do it. TCI, it says you can direct, instruct, or advise, but there's no sanction. In this case, we recommend. So the point that I'm making, Madam AG and members and chair, is that in preventing corruption, that's one way that you do it. But for it to be effective, I think we need to be committed to understanding what the issues are and to ensure that root cause analysis is done in terms of what the problem is, and an appropriate corrective or remedial action is developed and implemented. Or for the next 10 years, you'll be talking about the same thing, and you will have no improvement in the issue of corruption.
Chairman?
Yes, go ahead.
Just to say, Mr. Christie, much of what you have said is real music to my ears. The problems are great, and we tend to get frustrated along the way. But to my knowledge, and I stand corrected, this is the first time we have created a specific oversight committee for a commission of Parliament. Right, so let's mark that as progress. Secondly, what I really hear you saying, which is a point that I have made ad nauseum, is that passing laws is not enough. We have to look and assess what is required for successful implementation of the law. And if powers are prescribed and are assigned, then we also have to ensure that the resources to discharge those powers and functions are also in place. So the transition, it's really interesting because, a lot of noise is made about a lot of things, especially when time is allowed. So I heard the comment of Member Golding about the premature bringing into effect of the law, Member Bunting. And that is one perspective of it. The other perspective is what happens when the public, including members like Bunting, would clamor for a law to take effect so soon after passing without the assessment being done of what is required to properly and effectively implement a law.
Mr. Chairman,
so this
point of order.
is
Point of order. No,
perspective.
you're stating something that's incorrect.
Go ahead,
give me a case where I was clamoring for the law to be brought into effect prematurely. Can you cite one instance of that?
I don't remember him ever saying.
I've never said that.
All right.
In fact, I've consistently made the point that the effect of prematurely bringing the act into operation was to essentially neuter the contractor general and prevent many of his investigations from going forward.
If my recollection...
Member Bunting, it is not what you say, it's the words you use in what you say.
No, Chairman, if my recollection is faulty, but I do recall Member Bunting being among others asking specifically about this law. I recall that. But if my memory is faulty, I stand corrected.
It is a language.
Not only in this place, but external. So if his memory is faulty and mine, then we both should stand corrected. But I do believe that he was part of the call, and I'm not saying it was an inappropriate call at all, because in the absence of information, people don't know.
Chairman, I want to appeal again that we keep a focus, attention, and move this process along.
Thank you, Member Hilton.
But Mr. Chairman, with respect, Mr. Christie has not answered the second question, and I would like him to do that. But I would just remind him, he has shared his Sierra Leone thing. There was a joint select committee that received, I can't recall whether it was from you or other, but we received a submission on this model. and the Parliament decided that they did not want to go that way. Now, because it would be essentially transferring an executive function to you to determine, or to the Commission to determine, to set these procedures for the agencies. So having not decided to go that way, I don't think we have to belabor that point. But the innovation is for the Oversight Committee to receive your recommendations. And if you make such a set of recommendations, I'm sure the Oversight Committee will carry it forward to Parliament, or recommend it to Parliament, that the Executive can implement that. So I don't think we should spend too much time revisiting the work that the Joint Select Committee did in the previous administration, which many of us were members of that committee. But I really would like you to respond to why these investigations that commenced have not manifested the concluding reports.
But
Just
he wouldn't be in a
before-
position to answer that. No, he wouldn't be in the position to answer that.
Chairman,
He
just,
has
say
arrived.
why
You
there have
can
been no
ask him
report-
if he intends to pursue that.
Chairman,
I'm saying there's been a 2.5-year gap between, or more than 2.5-year gap between the announcement of these investigations, and we have seen no reports.
Yeah, but that's why I mentioned, in fairness, he has just arrived. But
No,
anyway,
but-
let him outline his plan.
He has answered all the questions.
Chairman, just before we invite Mr. Christie to respond, just permit me one comment on model. So the model that we have, I believe, was in part informed by work done through the Commonwealth Secretariat and the
Let me clarify
anti-corruption.
that, AG, because
Yes.
when we were hoping to establish a single anti-corruption agency, we established an advisory committee. The cabinet authorized the Minister of Justice at the time, who was me, to establish an advisory committee to look at this. We had, and the Sierra Leone model was one of the models that was looked at. Aspects of the Sierra Leone model were adopted, including the power to prosecute. However, it was felt that greater checks and balances needed to be built into our structure. Hence, we had the commissioners, separate from the persons who do the day-to-day work, and then the oversight committee to look at the commission as well. So it was really seeking to be a bit more balanced, whereas Sierra Leone was more a czar-type structure. So, and that is what was brought forward in the original bill that was tabled. It went to a joint select committee. It was reviewed extensively there. Then the election happened. There was a change of government. The bill was re-brought by the new government, adopting what was recommended by the Joint Select Committee and some other changes which they wanted to make themselves, and then it was brought into effect about 2 years later. I must say that it had already been planned, and I think funding had been identified, support from our multilateral partners, to do the preparatory work, to prepare for the transition from 3 agencies to 1. I don't know what happened in terms of the rollout of all of that, but based on the annual report for 2018-19, it is clear that that work had not really been completed at the time that the Commission was brought into effect. I sympathize with the Minister because I know that there were clamors for the new Act to come in, especially with the proliferation of corruption scandals that were plaguing the country in the run-up to the bringing of the Act into effect. So I sympathize with him because he was under considerable pressure to do what he did. But on reflection, it is quite clear that the agency wasn't ready to take on that role, especially when the effect of it was that the agencies that were previously seized with those investigations and matters could no longer function. And the question really is the legacy work, the legacy investigations that had been initiated by the OCG prior to, and which the transitional provisions in the Act provide for the continuance of under the new Commission. What is the plan for dealing with those and the time frame? Mr. Christie.
Just before you respond, just one last comment in respect of this. Was any of the work done through the modeling through the Commonwealth Secretariat?
That was the commissioners. May I just respond very quickly to that? Chairman, there's no doubt that Member Golden is correct that DFID in particular had funds to assist in the setting up of the Integrity Commission. Once the Integrity Commission was set up, the first meeting that I had with the Prime Minister and the commissioners was to inform them that DFID was quite prepared to start the process. So to the best of my knowledge, once I informed them and I informed DFID, rather than negotiating with me, they go straight to the commissioners. So to the best of my knowledge, during that period of 2018-2019, I believe, put it no stronger than that the commissioners were in touch with DFID and got support to use Price Waterhouse or some other agency to assist in the setting up. So that is something that can be checked on. But may I just ask, once I'm here, I like the idea, Mr. Christie, about education, information about corruption. But there's another leg that I think that the Integrity Commission should also undertake, and that is in the form of prevention, where you do some entrapment or sting operation. Can the Commission be put in a place? No, I quite frankly believe...
You're too close to the microphone.
Sorry?
You're muffling the mic.
The question arises, the best prevention, in my view, is if public sector workers, anyone, contractors, if it's possible to work with the police maybe, to set up sting operation or entrapping people in the act of corruption. Well, it's not entrapment is a good thing. If you catch them in the act, is that possible in the present legislation?
Mr.
Chairman.
Mr. Chuck, I just want to remind you, it is not our role here to make recommendations as to how Mr. Christie should discharge his responsibilities. So let us not go there.
Chairman.
Allow Mr. Christie to complete his answer. Member from West Kingston, my colleague, Western St. Andrew, my colleague, Hilton. Can you allow the Contractor General to complete his?
We are aligned on that, so that's where I was going. I want to hear the answer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, honourable members, for your comments and questions, all very important and valid. I just want to close off to respond to Member Bunting and Madam AG, Member Golden, and Minister of Justice. I accept that you have reviewed the various models, and the model that you would like is for this Commission to make recommendations to the Oversight Committee. I have just distributed a document, and that is taken from my 2011 annual report, the 25th annual report of the Contractor General, and I prepared it because I just wanted to say that when we make recommendations, they're not considered, then 10 years from now we'll be talking about the same thing. Those recommendations were made. What I did in 2011 was to capture a number of recommendations that were made during my tenure as Contractor General. I demitted office in 2012, and the great majority of those were not considered. And so I'm quite happy to be here and to work very closely, as I must, with this Oversight Committee and to make recommendations. And I said in my opening remarks, hopefully to find a way where we can engage each other with the outcome being to strengthen the Commission to effectively and efficiently achieve the objects of the Act and the institution, which is outlined in Section 3. All right? So, yes, we will bring the recommendations, and we hope that they'll be considered. Yes?
Mr. Christie.
I am coming. I will now deal with that. Member Bunting, I was expecting this because he spoke to me about it in the corridor.
He has approached you outside of the committee.
Yes, sir.
I see.
Yes, it's a valid question.
I simply gave him notice outside as a courtesy.
We thank you for that information.
I would not catch him unprepared.
Yes. Thank you, Member Monte.
At least we know that there's a cordial relationship between yourself and Mr.
Which we appreciate. Okay. Thank you. That is a question which deserves a proper answer. No, I'm coming to a point. I cannot answer the question. Section 53, subsection 3 of the Act. The Commission is prohibited from speaking on any investigation that is conducting.
You don't have to be specific.
What's that?
You don't have to be specific yet.
Okay, well, no, this is not Parliament. No, this is not Parliament. No, this is a committee. I beg to differ.
Well,
I am merely going.
Applies here too, though.
I'm merely going by the provisions of the Act, and let me see what I'm getting at. Section 53(3), which was promulgated by the Parliament of Jamaica, prohibits the Interior Commission from commenting on any investigation or report until the report is tabled in both houses of Parliament. And here is a point, Chair and Commission. These are matters that you are entitled to know about, because, for example, how do you assess the performance of this Commission? How do you know that we're not twiddling our thumbs and we're not doing our work? As Member Bunting has quite accurately pointed out, a number of investigations have been announced by one of the legacy commissions, which constitutes this commission, and nobody knows where they are, and you're quite entitled to know where they are. One of the things that I have been crucified for was announcing investigations, but that was one way where you could track what I'm doing and where I am with it. Because if after 2-3 years you haven't heard anything, and I think that's the point you're now making, we have announced it, but you've heard nothing. I believe that this commission is obliged to report to this committee, because one of your duties is to monitor the performance of the Commission. And I also believe that the people of Jamaica are entitled for an accounting. We are a so-called independent commission, but let me say this, I'm very equivocal about it. We are accountable. Independence does not mean that you're not accountable, and I want to make that quite clear. And I also subscribe to the rule of law. And this is why I'm compartmentalizing my response and trying to bring it within the framework of the law.
I need to say something.
Through you, Chairman, just to say, on a reading of Section 53(3), Mr. Christie is right. Whether it was the intention of the Parliament or not, the tabling of the report is not done through a committee, but it is done in the Parliament. And a reading of the law would put, you're right, the matter is held confidentially
Mr. Christie, before you go on, let me just ask you, in relation to what you have just said, let me ask you something. Is there any truth to the view held by many that the Commission is more focused, colleagues, that the Commission is more focused on the activities involving members of Parliament than it is about public officials?
Chairman, in all honesty, I could not answer that question, because to answer that question, I'll be going back in time, and I've only been here 2 months.
All right,
I could answer it this way, though, that, and I think in the second report that you're not on yet, the chairman of the commission made the point that parliamentarians are now 100% compliant in filing 100%, and I think that's highly commendable, in filing their asset declarations.
Yes.
And that's a major development.
Yeah, but let me refresh your memory on something that.
Yes.
Let me just, please. On the public officers. No, I'm not. We are on the report.
No, Mr. Chair, please, just give me a chance. Mr. Christie responded as to why he couldn't respond to the question.
And you're challenging it.
I'm just saying that Section 53(3) is to protect the individual in particular who may be the subject of investigation from the opprobrium or negative aspersions that may be inferred from being investigated until the report is actually finalized and tabled. It is a controversial provision which no doubt is going to be subject to consideration for amendment. However, what we're interested in is a portfolio of matters which have been inherited, not any specific matter. We want to know, is the Commission intent on, is it seized of those matters? Are those matters still being considered? What is the time frame for resolving them? That is a management function. We're not here asking about Tom, Dick, or Harry, or any specific investigation.
I'm having a challenge here. Because I don't have the capacity to listen to 2-3 people at the same time. And my mind works in a very orderly way. And I like when I'm speaking to be listened to, and I give you the respect in return. So if you are speaking, it would be very helpful if other members would not be chatting at the same time. Good.
I appreciate that. I'll just reiterate the point. The point I was making was that Section 53(3) is there to protect the individual who is being investigated from having the aspersions that publicity around the investigation would necessarily cast upon that person prior to the report being completed and tabled in Parliament. And there are provisions for a person being able to respond to any allegations against them and so on. It's a regime to protect the rights of the individual from being unfairly prejudiced while our investigation is underway. We are not interested in any specific, when we ask this question, we are not interested in any specific investigation. We're saying the Commission inherited a portfolio of pending matters, none of which have been brought to Parliament yet in a report. And we're asking what is happening with that portfolio. It concerns the effectiveness of the Commission, the effectiveness of the transitional arrangements that are being implemented, and so on. So it is really a matter very much relevant to our work as a Commission. So I don't want Mr. Christie to think that we are meddling in 53(3) matters. That's not the purpose. What we would love to know is, how is the portfolio of inherited work being addressed? Is it on the back burner? Is the Commission seized of it? Can we expect action in that regard? That's what we really would like to see.
Mr. Chairman, thank you very much, Member Golden, and thanks for your clarification. I'll probably respond by doing two things. I want to allude to the second schedule of the Act, which specifically states what the Commission can report to Parliament on, even in its annual reports, which you're now considering. It itemizes 9 items, and if you turn, it's on page 53 of the Act. 51. Thank you. And you will see how it deals with investigation matters. It's very guarded. And this is an actual report that comes to you. In fact, that's a report you're now considering, right? So subject to this, and it tells you, it says a number of investigations commenced but not finally dealt with during the financial year. And the average time it takes to deal with complaints and the actual time to investigate any matter in respect of which a report made. And then if you go to number 9, it says, such other information as the Commission thinks relevant. However, no detail shall be provided by the Commission in relation to any matter on investigation by the Director of Investigation or for which criminal proceedings have been instituted by the Director of Corruption Prosecutions. So Parliament went a further step to even tell you what you can report. One second,
Mr. Christie, the first one you said, the question I asked is squarely within the ambit of that first one.
You mean the number of investigations commenced?
Of the legacy investigations that came forward from the Office of the Contractor General, can you say how many there are? What is the progress on the portfolio, not on any individual one? What is the progress on that portfolio, and what is the expectation of disposing of it?
And Member Bunting, I'm just going to say to you that all that information would have been in the very report, at certainly number 2, had it not been for these restrictive terms in the second schedule. I just want to make that clear.
And point taken,
Having said that,
just to clarify one issue, the second schedule is dealing with the content of the annual report.
Yeah.
And it's indicative of what it should contain. We are an oversight committee asking questions on matters arising. So notwithstanding the fact that maybe the annual report doesn't answer our question, as long as there's no legal reason to preclude the answer, we would ask that it be answered. Now, it may be that you don't have the data and you're not in a position to answer it at this point in time, and I have no problem with saying, if that's the case, saying you want to review and decide how, but we really would like to know the status of the portfolio of legacy matters.
Mr. Chairman, if you have no objection, I will ask our Director of Investigation to answer the question as best as he could, confining it to numbers, recognizing that we are restricted by the very law, and I am an officer of the court. And at the end of the day, one second, at the end of the day, I think it's my responsibility to interpret the law and to take an interpretation from it.
No, all that is being asked, as Member Golden has said, how many legacy matters you had? 10? All 10 are still being dealt with? Have 2 been completed, or 8 still under consideration? You know.
Understand you to be saying, Mr. Christie, to the extent that any of the matter being inquired about involve matters under investigation for prosecution, then you feel that you're not at liberty to speak about them.
Precisely, Madam AG. And could I just say something?
Yeah, hold on a second. Mr. Christie, hold on 1 minute.
Yes.
Mr. Christie, you're an officer of the court, and you can interpret very clearly all aspects of matters relating to law in this committee. It is not challenging. If you feel you need more time to get properly prepared, or if you would like to defer to another officer, that's fine. But it is unreasonable, quite frankly, to try to convince us that you are not fully seized of the question being asked by Mr. Golden. It is
Mr. Chairman, I am fully seized with the question. In fact, my preamble is that I agree with him that he's entitled to information. All I'm saying is that when I look at this, I feel we are constrained. That's all I'm saying.
We understand.
And what the Parliament can do is to be very specific and put in here that you want this information, and we will provide it. Notwithstanding, I'm asking our Director of Investigation to see how he can walk through the raindrops and give you some information.
You don't want specifics. That's the point he has emphasized.
Mr. Chairman and your members, I thank you very much, and good day to you. Insofar as any legacy matter is concerned, Section 63 of the Act applies. So without giving you any details at all, any matter that was under the charge of the legacy entities we would be able to carry forward those matters as a result of the provisions in Section 63 of the Act. I can also tell you that there are 37 investigations that we have ongoing now. In terms of when those investigations will be completed, they are at different stages. I can't say exactly what the investigations are, but there are 37 investigations which were... They are legacy investigations. Yes, they predate the Integrity Act. So we are working on those matters. They are at various stages in terms of completing those cases. They are, of course, of varying levels of complexity. And so we are taking our time to ensure that we do a good job of these matters. And we will have the reports tabled in Parliament through the Commission in short order.
Well, that's clear.
Yeah, but what that tells us, in a sense, Mr. Chairman, it comes back to your opening question, resources. If of 37 legacy investigations, we have not had a report of a single one of the 37 in 2.5 years, it must say that the resources are woefully inadequate, or certainly up to this point, they have been, because all of us who have been involved in law enforcement know that the longer you take to bring these matters to a conclusion, the less likely you are to be able to mount a successful prosecution, if that was what was arising from it. So I'm very, very disturbed by the fact that with such a significant amount of cases, and understanding some will be more complex, some will be less complex, but we have not been able to dispose of a single one by way of report to the Parliament, then it speaks volumes to the inadequacy of investigative resources at the Commission.
Yes.
Mr. Christie, earlier when you were contextualizing your answer, you had indicated about a number of things internally within the organization that affected staff morale and issues that would have impacted the discharge of the duties in the transition period. Would you care to say a little bit more about that and how, if at all, those matters impact on what is being lamented as an understandable plight regarding the number of outstanding matters?
Thank you very much, Madam Attorney General. I think there's validity to both points, Member Bunting's and yours. I spoke about staff morale, and that had a lot to do with the fluidity of leadership in the organization, and also the uncertainties that resulted from the process of consolidating 3 institutions into one, and the obvious concerns that members of staff would have with respect to their future careers. And I believe it was section 64 of the Act, is 64, which speaks, no, which is it, 60, the transitional arrangements, 62. They're all on 6-month contracts, 6 months contracts. Think about that, being on a 6-month contract, not knowing what will happen at the end of that 6 months. And when I went to the office, that's what I found. Persons were leaving the organization because they didn't know what was going to happen down the road.
Has that impacted the progress on the investigations?
Well,
yes.
Was it? Okay. No, she's just pointing out to me that investigators resigned. I spoke about people leaving, yes, yeah. Well, that's one of the things. And of course, you're not going to get people working at the level of efficiency and effectiveness that they would.
This is an area that is of understandable concern. And in the absence of information in the public domain, people will speculate. We can all agree that it is undesirable. We're not excusing it away, but there is an explanation. So the next step is, how soon can we expect, now that things have settled on and you're restructuring the organization to make it fit for purpose, that some advance can be made on these outstanding matters?
And that brings me to the other point, which is that with more staff, Member Bunting, you can expedite issues. We have never been one. When you asked me at the outset, Mr. Chairman, how are we funded? I'm not one of those persons who believe that you have to have a lot of numbers. I try to get productivity out of what we have, recognizing that the country has challenges with money, especially at this particular point in time. With COVID-19, the budget of the government has been shot. And this is what I tell my staff, right? But yes, if we had more investigators, and I'm sure the first one to say that will be our Director of Investigations, we could expedite the outstanding investigations.
Now, when you said you wanted to move to 140, how many? Total
about 145, I think, will be coming back with. But if you'd want more investigators, wouldn't you want, Kevin?
Yes.
Yes, indeed. But one of the issues that really has delayed these matters is that currently we only have 4 investigators. And you would imagine that the workload for these investigators, I've only said to you the numbers relating to the investigations that you had asked a question about, but there are over 1,000 investigation matters which we will have to address. And many of these came across from another legacy entity which we will now have to work on in terms of completing the backlog and putting those cases out. There is also the issue of reorganizing the investigation division to ensure that the work that we are required to do now under the new piece of legislation, we can actually do that work with the resources that we have. So there is a significant backlog. So I just want to ensure that the point is made for the consideration.
One question I want to ask, if I may, through the Chair. The Act provides for significant capacity for sharing of information between law enforcement agencies. And I know you, and the Integrity Commission. The Integrity Commission is what I'm referring to. This was a breakthrough because the previous laws created silos which were relied on as a basis for not sharing information, and it was very deliberately done in a way that eliminated the silos. Given the capacity constraints of your department or your division, Mr. Stevenson, with the 4 investigators, are you able to leverage assistance or through cooperative arrangements with MOCA, for example, to help you to get through your work? Because they are also an anti-corruption agency, but much more from a forensic law enforcement standpoint. But the idea was always that there would be collaboration and that they would support with their resources the Integrity Commission's work. And there was even talk about having MOUs or service agreements between those agencies, and even between the prosecutors and the DPP's office as well. That was all discussed in the Joint Select Committee, and the law kind of facilitates it. So I'm interested to know how that relationship is unfolding. Is it functioning? Do you interact, or do you still operate in a very separate way?
Add on to that, which is where I was going. Specifically, the competent authorities with whom you may collaborate are listed: the DPP, my own office, TAJ, the Financial Investigation Division, MOCA, Revenue Protection Division, JCF, the Jamaica Customs Agency, and any other. So back to Member Golden's question as to whether any MOU or any cooperation agreements in place.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Through you, I'll respond. Excellent question, because we understand the framework of the legislation as designed, that we are expected to collaborate with law enforcement, especially criminal investigative law enforcement. So what we have done, despite the fact that we've just been in office 2 months, we have already met with, I met with the Commissioner of Police. We met with MOCA, we met with CTOC, and we met with FID. And we met with the leadership of these organizations. We have sent to all of them a draft memorandum of understanding, which Section 7 of the Act contemplates. And we are now in advanced discussions to settle those MOUs with a view of collaborating and not overlapping resources, but exactly, sir, exactly. So despite the fact that, and I need to say something again, need to say this organization is just getting off to a start, although it's 2 years and 5 months old. We've accomplished that in less than 2 months. So, and it goes back to the point that I make, that we understand the framework that we're expected to work with, and we're leveraging that. And that, although we need more investigators, we also recognize that by working with established law enforcement agencies and relying upon their resources and assets, it would mean then that we do not have to come to the country or to the government and make additional demands. And we had in fact, last week we had a 2.5-hour meeting with Colonel Edwards and a team of 6 from MOCA, and very fruitful meeting. And we're now, Gillian, our legal counsel, is actually steering the whole MOU development process.
So you're in a collaborative taking a collaborative
Absolutely, Mr.
approach.
Chairman. We are doing what you expect us to do. We're actually looking at all the pieces of the legislation and making sure that we work through that framework.
I go back to my initial question, and that was the one that Minister Bunting thought I was getting a little ahead of myself. The attention, there is a perception that the attention of the Commission is more focused on parliamentarians than on public sector, public officials. Can you confirm or deny that?
Let me answer it this way. This is the first time I've appeared before the committee. And again, I understand the framework, and the framework, as I understand it, of the committee engaging the Commission is one of accountability. We need to account, and I've spoken about that before. That's something I subscribe to. And we hope that through this engagement, it will rebound to the benefit of the Commission, to the country. So I am 100% in support of appearing before you and answering your questions and giving the information that you require. In terms of your questions, whether it's focused upon parliamentarians, I don't think so. From what I've observed today and the questions that you've asked, I would say that my own perspective is that the Oversight Committee wants to be an Oversight Committee and look at the entire landscape within which we are operating as a national.
Well, the reason why I mention it,
Commission.
Mr. Christie,
Yes.
is because, and I'm going to quote from the document, page 19 of the first report, public office. The examination of statutory declarations for public officers has not commenced as due to the chronic staff shortage. The posting of the data from the declarations to the computer database has not been completed. It is anticipated that in the near future, a robust strategy will be employed to alleviate the backlog that is being experienced. Now, firstly, it is not first report. So we don't have the second because I did, no, that specific point. What I would like, Mr. Christie, is if you could just indicate what specific strategies, because it mentions here a robust strategy will be embarked upon. What specific strategy are you planning to employ?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm going to answer the preamble, and then I'm going to ask the Director of Information and Complaints to get into more detail. There's good reason for this statement by the former chairman in his report. Remember, there were 3 agencies. One was dedicated exclusively to taking declarations from parliamentarians.
I see.
All right? One whole organization. That was the Parliamentary Commission. So it's not surprising that we could get to 100%, whereas the other one, the Corruption Prevention Commission, was responsible for taking 30,000, as opposed to 80, was it 83, 84 now? Right? So having said that, in terms of the strategy going forward, we want to get to the point where this merged institution, or the Interior Commission, is staffed, structured, and resourced to bring the same level of robustness that we have had with parliamentarians, to bring that right across the public sector. And I'm going to ask Craig to respond.
But before he does, would you say that the state of the preparation to be able to do that has in some way compromised that area of your operation? Because you're reporting, you're not, listen, during the period under review, 32 complaints were directly received by the division, but it doesn't really. Yeah, I'm working on the first. You want to point to the second one specifically where it refers? I don't think it does.
There's a great deal of data in the second one about the various activities of the various divisions.
But you
and
can
so
go
on.
ahead and nonetheless address the point.
Statutory
Mr. Chairman, I will let,
declarations.
sorry, member.
Yes, I just public officials. So it's on page 46 of the second report.
Yeah.
Have a look at that, sir. It speaks to, there's a whole section on the declarations involving public officials. And it makes the point that at 31st of March 2020, 30,000 statutory declarations were due from public officials. It gives a definition of who is a public official. It says the Commission received approximately 12,500 statutory declarations as at that date, March 31st this year, 42% of the ones that are due. That excludes, of course, the parliamentarians who were separately, and we're 100% compliant, which I hope the media will carry that.
Yeah, but that is the point. We want to get to a stage where
Everybody, yes, sir.
And there's this differential
Yes.
as it takes us now. So tell us the strategy.
Well, he already, Mr. Beresford, went through
tell
it,
us the
or you can do it again. He has a, go ahead.
Tell us the strategy.
Mr. Chairman, there's a way of introducing Craig. Craig was formerly after the Contractor General, and then he went to work with CARICOM for the past 7 years. And he has been the Director of Strategic Management for CARICOM for 7 years, working in the Secretariat. So he has a very unique skill set which will add significant value to the Commission. We were awaiting his arrival to begin the strategic planning and all these things that we're talking about.
So he has brought relief to your office.
Absolutely, sir.
Oh.
Absolutely.
So you come highly recommended. So
yes,
you just tell us.
I have assigned to him, this is outside his functional responsibilities of managing the complaints information division, all the strategic programs, development programs for the Commission, or business plan, or a strategic plan, and of course under Section 6 you will see that there's supposed to be a national strategic plan for anti-corruption. Craig is going to lead that for us. The Commission is assigned leadership for that, but obviously we have to interact with all the ones that the competent authorities that you mentioned, AG, to do that, as well as this committee. So, Craig.
Thank you very much, Edie, and through you, Chair.
Yeah.
As it concerns the strategy that we're employing, we are going to first focus on ensuring that all the information is inputted in the database. That's the first and foremost important thing, because what has passed, and this goes back to a concern that you raised in terms of what will we do with the other declarations that we would have had which were manually submitted. Everything will be subjected to interrogation once we start to implement our audit process. So whatever has passed will still be reviewed, but it will take time. We may projectize that and let a few of our analysts focus on that. I will give you the time frame as I go along.
Okay.
As it concerns the backlog of data entry, we intend to complete that within the maximum 1.5 years. We will continue using the intakes that come in on an annual basis, and we will have a regime that will treat with those in the current form. However, we will also ensure that the information that we receive will form a part of those analysis as we undertake them to inform our final report when we ask the Commission to consider whether or not those should be subject to further interrogation by our investigation division. We are also establishing a 3-tier defense system with respect to our analysis. And as I said before, it will be risk-based. So the riskier ones will be subjected to more deeper interrogation. And that, of course, will take a more sensitive time frame in terms of ensuring that those are delivered in a very timely manner. I will not give the specific timeline because we are still working through our processes. But our auditing will be done on an ongoing basis, and it can mean that anywhere between 1 to 5 years, a public officer will be subjected to deeper review in terms of their own declaration. But we have a more, what we call, significant matter that needs to be addressed, and we are going to spend the next month or two to get the database right with respect to receipts Because as I understand it now, our compliance rate for public officials have never exceeded 60 or 70%. And we are going to be taking a zero tolerance approach, and we will be ensuring that we follow the act in terms of giving notice and then making the necessary referrals to treat with those issues. Because we do want other public officials to boast the same thing as parliamentarians with respect to a 100% compliance rate. So that will be the primary focus first.
You made a point of 4 to 5 years of DEPA. Is there some statute of limitations why you would say, I'm interested, at what point does a public official or a parliamentarian know that, it's settled? There is no more there's no more interrogation of the thing, that it has been accepted. Is there a statute of limitations or any administrative, point at which you say? Because I'm interested to know, are you going back to 2003? Is there some magic about 2003? You said deeper investigation up to 5 years. Just trying to understand what guides those.
As it concerns the statute of limitation, I'm not aware of any. So it therefore means that, notwithstanding the fact that we may review the information we have now, new information may come. Because, for instance, someone may declare that they have certain assets, and then information comes that that asset was probably hidden under someone else's name. Now, if that is subject to deeper investigation, that person will have to show how they acquired that asset, and that is not the public official, that is the other person, and then it may come out who the asset really belongs to. But that's not a matter for us. That's a matter for investigation if they made the determination to consider that. So as it stands now, we will do the deeper analysis. We will identify certain flags, and then at that point we will make a recommendation to the commissioners for them to make their own decision as to whether or not it will be subject to further investigation.
Presumably, Mr. Chair, when you're dealing with 30,000 plus persons every year.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Go on.
Just to confirm, when I said 5 years, I'm not talking about how far we'll go back. I'm speaking to us being able to examine those declarations and either using the risk-based approach or audit approach, be able to look and have a discussion, conversation with any or some of those public officials. My apologies.
Like a
so it's not
sensitivity
that
approach.
it is restricted to 5 years. It's within 5 years we will seek to look as many as possible, if not all, in some way, shape or form. As we said, using the algo, it should be able to give us a few things. Right. We red flag them, and then there are others that we will have to audit in a deeper way. And that is also going to be based on information we receive through complaints. And the education is important because we want everyone to understand what is corruption and what are the things they should look out for, so they can report to us to allow us to be able to do deeper review and analysis.
Mr. Chair, we've had illicit enrichment as an offense in our law for a long time, but the number of prosecutions for it are relatively minuscule. And to me, it's a sort of central offense because it's where your assets are not explained by your income, and your declared income anyway. And I think that is a really critical area. And I hope that, we'll get to the point where public officials input their data online, as has been said. They have an account of some kind with the commission where, their data is there, and you can run algorithms around that data to see if there are any red flags, and then that determines whether further investigation is warranted or not. Obviously, you also rely on other sources of information, such as complaints, because it may not be red flagged by the algorithm, but there may be a good reason to look further at something. And then you start to have a robust system of monitoring what's going on. Yeah. It can't be done manually. It's too many people.
It can be. And also, there are troves of data available in various organizations of government or agencies of government. The Companies Office, the Commissioner of Lands, the land titles, etc. The Stamp Office, the tax, the tax departments, that you can cross-reference, but it's such big data that only computer algorithms can trawl through that kind of data and be able to identify the suspected transactions or individuals, and then maybe 1% or a fraction of 1% would then warrant further audit or investigation by the staff. But it's very critical that from your design level, the foundation, that you design your system with the ability to take input from all these other departments. And as we're saying,
yeah, but it'll also facilitate the current year.
Yes, and obviously you're going to put more emphasis on who is here now than those who retired 10 or 15 years ago.
Exactly.
But coming back to connecting this with an earlier point by Mr. Christie about prevention, or that important aspect. When you were Contractor General, I seem to recall, and I'm not sure whether it was through your office or the NCC, but there was a regular publication of all contracts that were issued by government agencies. I'm not, my memory is a little vague on it. I can't remember whether it was limited to construction contracts or so, but there was a regular publication, and I think you even made comments on
quarterly returns had to be filed by public agencies.
Right, and you made but it was published on our website.
I think so.
And I have no recent recollection of that being done. Is that work still underway today by the current Integrity Commission? Because I think publication of these, exposing them to public scrutiny, is one way of identifying potential violations or complaints that your little staff could never do if you really incorporate the public as partners to help you look at all these and I think it would be very helpful if you had just a website that all these contracts that are issued, and maybe again, just as the way we talk about a risk-based assessment, you might, for example, highlight all the unsolicited or uncompetitive proposals. You might give those a section for themselves because, of course, that's where much more risk would be. So if you could speak to either what you're doing now, well, first of all, confirm whether, I'm not aware that it still takes place. Somebody, since we've been here sitting, claimed that the last update was in 2014 or something like that.
Remember the public procurement is now no longer under the Integrity Commission. There's a separate public procurement commission, whereas previously the NCC was, I think, administered through a secretariat at the OCG's office.
But it is not outside the mandate of the Integrity
No, but there is
Commission.
exactly. So I don't know. I think the question is it now being done by the Public Procurement Commission?
Right, it's now being done. That's the important thing.
Mr. Christie, you want to comment on what members said?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Member Bunting.
I'm
going to rely upon...
You go on forever.
The way I had designed it was that it would be a public database, and it was a quarterly contract or report, and all public bodies are required to send in their information within 1 month of the end of each calendar year quarter. When I left office, we had 100% compliance, I know for 13 consecutive quarters. We used that database basically to red flag public bodies. I think we'd grade them in 4 categories. And in terms of their compliance with procurement requirements. And depending on where they were graded, it could trigger an investigation, an audit, or a phone call or something. But they would come to Parliament, the PAC, and they would say, I scored 80%. So we changed the culture. And at the same time, we brought transparency to the process because the public could go on and interrogate the data through contractors, the type of contract, whatever. I'm going to ask Sashane to report to the committee as to how robust that is. Member Golden, you alluded to the PPC, but that is ours, not the PPC's. We pull information ourselves because it's our QCA report, which goes out from the Integrity Commission now, and the public bodies respond to us. So, Sasha, Maurice, okay.
Thank you, Edie. Chairman, members. I might just want to make reference to page 34 of the second annual report, which treats with the quarterly contract award reports. For the period ended, we had a 97%.
Sorry, page what?
34 of the second annual report. And so that's the quarterly contract award report. For the period ended, we had a 97% compliance rate. There were some difficulties that we encountered primarily in the last quarter of the financial year with several public bodies due to restrictions regarding the pandemic. Additionally, over the years, we have expanded certain of the fields that are contained in the QCA report to now include the actual dates of cabinet approval and the NCC endorsement. There is a distinction though between the QCA reports and the NCC endorsement list, which I believe Member Bunting might have been referring to. That endorsement list, it's no longer carried by the current Integrity Commission, and for some time it had ceased. Relying more so on the actual awards, recognizing that in some instances it would have been endorsed by the NCC but not eventually awarded. So there was a distinction there between the two.
You know what would be useful is if you could have a drop-down menu that would tell you each year who were what companies comprised the amount.
The QCA database, which currently has several thousand entries, you're able to filter, Chairman, by the name of the company, location, contract type. So if it is sole source or unsolicited, you're able to interrogate it in that way. I must also make mention that prior to the new executive membership coming on, we were making certain plans to enhance that database and how the public could interact with it. So
this
it is
actually by itself is not as useful without the background information, because there's no basis on which you can make a comparison. You can make a comparison on the total annually, but you can't make a comparison of the composition, how it's composed.
not as it is presented here.
Not as it's presented.
No, and that is where the live database.
You may want to, I'm not advising you what to do, but for clarity of information, you may want to go there.
Right, and if I may, the live database it does present that option to interrogate and to do the comparisons.
Right. This is accessed through the Integrity Commission's website? Is that how you get to it?
Yes, it is. It is still published on the Integrity Commission's website.
I see.
And it is in the form of a Microsoft Excel database at current.
Do you get data from the Public Procurement Commission at all, or directly from the ministries, departments, and agencies?
It is through the MDA's member.
There was an exclusion in the old Office of the Contractor General of land divestment. I think it specifically excluded that. Is that part of the published contracts now?
The matter of land divestments, it is not published via the QCA platform. It's a separate portfolio. We usually capture
but
that.
But now it falls within the ambit of the Integrity Commission.
Yes, the definition of government contract is now very explicit to include both divestment and acquisition of assets.
So is there somewhere on a website that you can similarly interrogate, the same way you can by the quarterly contract awards, that you can similarly interrogate land divestment?
No, at current that is not published by us, but it is a worthwhile recommendation that we could look into.
sales and leases.
You'll do it.
Sales and leases, both.
Yeah.
Sales and leases.
AG?
Just wanted to find out, a lot of focus has been placed on the investigative, prosecutorial, and receiving complaints role, but has anything yet been done in respect of the examination of the practice and procedures of public bodies, and whether any recommendations has been formulated to be made for the revision of those practice and procedures with a view to reducing occurrence of corruption?
Thank you very much, Madam AG, member. That goes back to what I spoke about before, creating a fourth operating division, corruption prevention division, to tackle those matters under Section 6, which have not been addressed in the 3 operating divisions. That was a big flaw, not in the design of the law, because the law makes provision for the creation of other divisions, but in the organizational structure. So I can tell you this, we are far advanced in the revised organizational structure, and it will have 4 operating divisions. Obviously, we preserve the 3 that Parliament has already prescribed, and we'll have a 4th which will concentrate solely on all the other items in 6, and I can just quickly just enumerate them for you. C, D, G, H, I. Oh, okay. Oh, what's that? You're able to read it? Yes, okay, sir. Okay, C, D, G, H, I, J, K, L, M, Q, O, and of course P is to deal with the matter referred to us. But so you see, yes. Exactly. So you see how many of the items in 6 focus on prevention, but we did not have an operating division to do that. So we're creating one just to handle that. And I should mention something in passing with respect to prevention. The private sector, at least one arm of the Jamaica's private sector, has reached out to me, the Jamaica Chamber of Commerce, Mr. Lloyd Distant, and we have had, and I'm grateful to them. And we had a meeting with their leadership, and they were interested to know how they could assist the Interior Commission in its, in its discharge of its mandates and to accomplish the objects which are set out here. And essentially, how do we reduce corruption in Jamaica? So we had a very spirited discussion, a great discussion, and there's one recommendation that I made that they took very positively, and there's an ISO standard called ISO 37001, and it's an anti-bribery, a corporate anti-bribery standard, was introduced about 3 years ago, and my recommendation to them is that they may wish to invite their membership to comply. It's because it's a voluntary standard, and basically what it is, if you're familiar with the ISO concept, is to create a quality system of policies, procedures, and work instructions with a particular objective. And in this case, the objective is to reduce bribery on the part of commercial enterprises. They accepted the proposal. I'm yet to hear from them as to how they propose to implement it. I also suggested to them that they may want to embrace the private sector of Jamaica as well, and its membership.
Does that influence the corruption index?
I'm happy that you raised that point, Mr. Chairman, because what this says is that the Interior Commission cannot function by itself. There are lots of stakeholders, and if we're ready to make a dent in this issue of corruption in Jamaica, it involves us, it involves you, it involves the private sector. We need to teach our school children, public sector officers, what to do. We need to strengthen concepts of integrity and good governance right across the framework. There are lots of agencies involved.
Because, Chairman, through you, corruption, kind of like prostitution, involves it's a public-private partnership, so to speak, you know?
Yes.
Meaning there are two...
No, that was just private.
Well, that one might be private. And so, you know, one cannot exclude the parties who are typically on the other side of the corruption transaction. And indeed, the Corruption Prevention Act, a number of the offenses would capture both sides of the transaction. So the question really is how, there's presently in your commission structure, I don't think there's anything that's focusing on corruption outside of the public sector. Certainly the declarations are entirely within the public sector. I'd be interested to see, maybe not today, but at some point, what the thinking is within the commission as to how to extend the operations of the commissions so as to also address corruption outside of the public sector, because the current structures, I think, are pretty much focused on the public sector. Although the law, as has been said, does contemplate corruption, the scope of the commission being broader than just the public sector.
Mr. Chairman, thank you for that, Member Golden. That very last point that you made about considering extending the ambit of the discharge of the mandates of the Commission to corruption in the private sector, the way it is right now, if we're looking at public sector corruption, and let's say there's a private sector person who, for example, bribes a public official, then we're looking at the whole shebang. But let's say you have a private sector entity that's procuring something, and there are 4 private sector suppliers, but they choose the one who is related to the brother of the procurement officer, then that's corruption, but between 2 private sector entities. Do we have jurisdiction? I would like to draw your attention to Section 2, sub B of our legislation, and to invite your consideration of that. This is what it says. In this act, unless the context otherwise requires, an act of corruption means an act which constitutes B, an offense relating to the conduct of any person that constitutes an abuse or misuse of his office, and it says in parentheses, whether or not within the public sector. So we have looked at this and we have said, but wait, the way this act is designed, the Integrity Commission, the supposition is that our powers extend beyond the public sector into private sector transactions between 2 private sector entities. And the way it's structured right now, or designed, it's not designed for this. And I said this earlier in my opening remarks, that the revised structure we're looking at, Chairman and members, is to have a more robust design to deal with public sector corruption. But at some point, we will have to come to you to say to you, when do we spread our wings to have oversight over what we are presuming here is the intent of Parliament?
Yeah. The Act has so many interesting features in it. I mean, for example, the provision we looked at earlier, Member Warmington, as is his wont, was very interested in, who bodyguards a bodyguard. In other words, how your returns or declarations to be addressed. And the regulation empowers the Commission to make specific regulations as to how the commissioners and staff of the Commission should file their declarations. It's up to them to come up with a design that is as transparent as possible. Perfection is never possible in life, but on earth anyway. But you can come as close as possible, whether you outsource it to the ICAJ, the Institute of Chartered Accountants of Jamaica, to recommend a firm to review, or you do it, that's one possibility, through Governor General. I don't know, they're very resource-starved as well. So, but the point is, the law does allow the Commission to make the regulation as to how that will be addressed. So it
could provide, for example, for the ICAJ to recommend a private sector auditor to review an audit firm to review your declarations. Mr. Chairman, I have been going through the Contractor General's remarks, the 2011, I think they were extracted from, which was circulated earlier. And I note on the page 57 the recommendation to halt the illegitimate abuse of the government's emergency contracting facility. I have been a member of the Public Accounts Committee for some time, and when you look at the Auditor General's report and the
serial abuse,
the abuse of this, it is, I would say, it is the best indicator that there is something untoward going on. When you look at some agencies, 80% or the majority, the vast majority of the contracts that they award is in some way, shape, or form direct sourcing, you know, whether it's emergency or whatever other justification they use for it.
And often to people who have a connection with the top man or
yes.
person in the agency.
It's such a red flag that I would suggest special attention is paid to publishing these and to draw the public's attention, because this is really in terms of the risk-based assessment and filtering. If you put 100,000 contracts into the public domain, for all intents and purposes, the average person will never be able to dedicate the time to go through it. But if you say filter by sole sourcing or emergency contracting, filter by size, filter by whatever agency, then it really allows people very quickly to pay attention to any area of interest.
Goes back to the report that we were speaking about earlier.
And I think it would be a powerful deterrent in real time, so to speak, if you were doing it quarterly, because so soon as they're making the decision, they know it is going to be exposed shortly. Whereas when the Auditor General has, like you, limited capacity, does a few reports a year, agencies will be audited in a long cycle on average, so there is very little deterrent effect. There is some, but modest.
And so little comes out of it.
Yeah, modest. Whereas I think if there was a regular quarterly reporting of that, drew attention, so those who use emergency contracting as their routine method would be, every quarter some attention should be drawn to it. Now that's not, I'm not talking about an investigation, I'm just talking reporting, so you don't have any restriction in terms of in the section that deals with investigation. This you're just reporting the ongoing methods of various agencies of government, ministries, departments, and agencies, and how they are operating. I think it would be very useful, and I don't think it is out of order. I'm not suggesting how you do your work, but Section 6 says allows this committee to refer matters for your consideration, and it's in that context that I'm referring this, especially reinforced by your own set of recommendations and observations, albeit wearing a different AG cap.
Mr. Chairman, through you, could I just ask our investigation department if you could take that recommendation on board? Is that something we can do right away, quarterly, to pull the information?
See, Mr. Chris is very careful, and he wants to do that on the record.
Yes, I want to put it on the record.
Put it on the record.
I also want to put on the record the other matter, land divestment.
Yeah. Okay.
Those are things that we can do.
Yes.
And how soon can they look on our website and see this information? For example, we could go back.
I would like to add on another recommendation. There is a tendency when we speak about matters in government for the impression to be given that infractions are primarily at the feet of the political directorate. But government comprises more than the political directorate, and it may be helpful to also help the public to understand who has the function, who are the decision makers, to whom, in public law, a statutory function that is ascribed to one person cannot variously be performed by another. I mean, these are matters that I deal with routinely in the Office of Attorney General. And as part of the regularization of the public sector, it will be really helpful for members of the public to understand who is entrusted with discharging certain functions. And we know accountable officers are designated at the level of permanent secretaries. Right. So just part of it. Chairman, at an appropriate stage, bearing in mind the clock, there is one question I would like to ask as part of the wrap-up. I don't know if you're yet there or you have other things you wish to deal with.
You'd like to raise a point?
One question.
Yes.
Well...
No, you can do it now.
Just to say that I had read in the past of concerns about comments made by parliamentarians, in particular, that have served to demoralize the Commission generally, and perhaps specific. I'm just wondering if there is any way in which parliamentarians have operated and comments that have been made regarding the work of the Commission or any aspect of what you have been charged to do as a Commission in Parliament that has negatively impacted your image, your profile, your morale, or anything like that.
Mr. Chairman, through you, sir. Madam AG member, I can't speak for the past. What I can assure you, and this rearview mirror, I can assure you that on my watch, going forward, the executive team, we're looking forward to working with this committee and in a genuine partnership. We're here whenever you want us to appear before you. We genuinely would like to account, and we genuinely like to strengthen a partnership, because you're the parliamentary representatives, I know I speak for all of this group when I say that we're patriots and we want a better Jamaica, and that's why some of us are here, and we've left where we are to come back here. So I am committed to that and looking forward to the relationship with the committee, and I am confident that we can build that relationship together, one of a real relationship and not one where we're at each other.
Oh no. Mr. Chair, it was recognized that the Corruption Prevention Commission, the Parliamentary Integrity Commission, over the years in their annual reports, the OCG, had asked for things to be done by Parliament, and they were largely ignored. Or if they weren't ignored, they were read once, but there was no follow-up on them. This is one of the reasons, perhaps the main reason, why this law creates this committee exclusively for your commission. It's the only one that has a parliamentary committee exclusively dedicated to providing oversight. And I think it should be an iterative process. There may be times when you would like us to have an opportunity to have a meeting because there's some burning issue, not affecting an individual investigation. That's not our purview. That is yours. But structural or policy-wise, that needs parliamentary attention. And I don't think there should be any hesitation for you to reach out to Parliament and ask for a meeting to be convened. Because sometimes our committee, we're a relatively small Parliament, and with the demand for oversight and accountability, more and more committees exist, and it's the same body of MPs and senators who have to man all of them. Many of them are ministers as well. So, maybe are rural MPs and coming into Kingston. So the reality is that the Parliament's resources are terribly stretched, and the support staff are stretched. Very much so. So I don't see anything wrong with us having a kind of relationship where we're all on a common mission, which is to furtherance of the objects of your statute and the fight against corruption in this country. And we must work collaboratively to make to do the best we can.
Yes.
You remember now the time is not on our side.
Within the minute that's left, let me just say, Mr. Chairman, on behalf of our side of the House, I really welcome the spirit with which Mr. Christie and his team have come to the committee this morning. And I look forward to working in a true partnership to advance the objects of the committee. The only small thing I would point out to him when he spoke to meeting various members of various parliamentary officers, that since the primary oversight is of the government, he shouldn't only meet with the government officers of parliament, but I suggest he also meet with the opposition's representative. There's the leader of the opposition, there's the leader of opposition business, who is yours truly, etc., that you can also interact with.
There's nothing that prohibits that.
Respond?
Yeah.
I fully agree with you, Member Bunting. When I came into office, I set about organizing courtesy calls, first with His Excellency the Governor General, then with the Prime Minister, in that order, and I wrote to the leader of the opposition. He has not responded. And then after that, I met with the Speaker of the House, I met with the President of the Senate, and I met with the Ministry of Finance. So yes, the order, and I can say this to you, there are several officials who invited me, who requested that they wanted to meet with me, and I told them I could not do it until I met with the officials of state. I won't call names, but I just want to say to you that my order was His Excellency the Governor General, the Most Honorable Prime Minister, and the Honorable Leader of the Opposition. Official letters were written to all of them. We have not yet heard from the Opposition Leader.
Now that you brought it to my attention, I will take it.
You will take it, but Mr. Christie.
Chairman, just one thing to say, that as part of deepening the understanding too, the government will reach out for meetings in the same way across, outside, in addition to this forum, in order to gain a better understanding of what is required to be done.
Right. Now, Mr. Christie, before we close, I have one question left to ask you. If you refer to, in report number 1, page 69, and in report number 2, page 85, you will see it's suggesting that you're going in the wrong direction with respect to your staffing. Or let's put it this way, there's an inadequacy there that at some stage has to be addressed. Whereas in the first report you had a shortage of 13 members of staff, and in your second report you have a shortage of 32, although you have taken on more, you've filled more posts, but the shortage leaves a gaping hole.
Mr. Chairman, let me see if I can bring some clarification to this.
Yes.
The first report would have been the establishment of the 3 organizations.
Yes.
Altogether, right? And that would be 94.
94.
Right. The second report,
same thing with
105. As to, it would be the approved, 105 would be approved.
Right, but you only, in the
no,
first...
but this is now the overall organization that is approved by Parliament, 135.
Yes, but you have, point I'm making,
yes,
is that you had in the column that deals with filled, you filled in 81, and now you have only filled 70.
The answer for
so
that,
you're going in the wrong direction.
Yes, absolutely, because of the problems I spoke about before. Yeah, persons were resigning.
Well, you need, that has to be stepped up if
you're
going to get the job done.
It's fixed, Chairman. I think, as I said, there was this concern about where the organization was going. At least that's what I picked up. And since coming into office, the Commission has supported our recommendations. One is to move away from the interim 6-month contracted arrangement to a 1-year contracted arrangement. And then when, in terms of the engagement going forward for all the staff that we're bringing together, we're going on a 3-year contract basis. And with that, staff have now, I think they've now bought into the fact that you now have the permanent leadership on board, and they see where they have job security, and they see where the organization is going. I should also mention that despite the fact that the structure is flawed. We have not thrown it out. What we're doing is that the positions in respect of which there is no dispute, we have been filling those positions. So we are appointing persons to positions, and you'd have seen advertisements in newspapers as well. I refer in particular to the prosecution department, where there's no dispute, because it's a brand new department. We've advertised, and I think this week we conducted interviews, right, Keisha?
How many posts are there in that
Keisha,
department?
you want to speak on your department?
Thank you, Member Golding. We have on the organizational structure approved 4 attorneys for now, a legal secretary and 2 paralegals. Our interviews were conducted with respect to the senior prosecutor last week, and we have already advertised for the legal secretary and paralegals.
But they're still short. They're short. And you can't do the job without staff. So you've got to get there. It's very important.
Absolutely.
Mr. Christie, I want to, on behalf of the committee, thank you very much for coming here today and being forthright in your answers. We have enjoyed an excellent meeting. It has started well, and you have my assurance, because I am acting on instructions of the Prime Minister, who instructed me, not requested of me, instructed me to do everything in my power as chairman of this committee to facilitate the work of the Commission, to ensure that collectively we put an end to the scourge of corruption in the country. Any small part that we can play in doing that, you have the commitment of the committee, I know, but specifically of the chair. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, for your leadership, and thanks for your support, the honorable members, of the work that we're doing. We look forward to strengthening our relationship, although this is just the first meeting, and we stand ready and willing to meet with you to further your examination of these reports and to ask us the questions that we look forward to answering.
Very good.
Thank
Excellent.
you, sir. Thank you very much.
Good. Thanks for a very successful meeting.
Date of next meeting.
Date of the next meeting. Should we meet every 2 weeks? We can't meet every week.
No, we can't meet every 2 weeks.
I think we would like to just at least finish the consideration of the 2
Annual
reports.
report.
The next
I mean, a lot
so
of today was
week
more
after
broad
next.
issues, but I think there's some issues
No, but we
in the
go on
report.
recess. We go on recess
20
for August.
All right, so 2 weeks' time would carry us into the holiday period.
No, well then that can't.
So
It's not likely.
I would say so soon as we come back from
when we
from
So let's
summer
adjourn
break.
the committee finally then, because we don't really know
when that will be,
Yeah.
for a date to be fixed.
All right.
Okay.
Thank you all very much. My colleague here, in this business of politics, you don't always get the answer to the question you ask the way you want it. He knows what I'm talking about, and he will pursue that vigorously to ensure that there is a reply to your invitation. Meeting stands adjourned.
Hello? 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 Yeah, you. Hold on, and a pandemic winner. You're not wearing a mask, you're not washing your hand, and you're not keep the required 6 feet distancing from other people. And what could I really cause you? You need to stop it.